The massive space station floated in the void between stars like a crystal palace made of metal and light. Nexus Prime was the largest structure ever built by living beings, home to the Galactic Council that ruled over 12 different alien species across hundreds of worlds. Inside its gleaming halls, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what would become the most important meeting in galactic history. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the alien fleet patrol the border of human space. His weathered face showed the stress of commanding humanity's frontier defenses for the past 5 years. Jake had fought in 3 different wars before humans ever left Earth, but nothing had prepared him for the politics of galactic civilization. The aliens were advanced, powerful, and growing more hostile toward humanity with each passing month. His communications officer turned toward him with a worried expression. The message from Earth had finally arrived after traveling across light years of space. President Lisa Carter wanted Jake to attend an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The subject was humanity's future in the galaxy, and the tone suggested it would not be a friendly discussion. Jake ordered his second-in-command to take control of the fleet and prepared for the journey to Nexus Prime. The trip took 3 days. Through hyperspace, during which Jake reviewed everything he knew about the 12 alien species that controlled galactic politics. The Zilani were tall, proud warriors who built the largest warships in known space. The Ethereals looked like living light and possessed technology that seemed like magic to human eyes. The crystalline collective thought with one shared mind across millions of individual bodies. Each species was older than humanity by thousands of years, and each one viewed humans as dangerous newcomers who did not belong among the civilized races of the galaxy. When Jake arrived at Nexus Prime, he was escorted to the council chambers by silent alien guards. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in a perfect circle around a central platform where speakers could address the assembly. 12 different alien delegates sat in their designated areas, while Jake was directed to a small observation section marked for non-voting species. Chairman Vexstar rose from his seat, his insect-like body towering over the other delegates. His multiple eyes fixed on Jake as he began to speak in the universal translation language that all council members used. The chairman's words were formal and cold, but their meaning was clear enough to chill Jake's blood. The council had been watching humanity's expansion across their section of the galaxy. In 50 years, humans had gone from a single world to dozens of thriving colonies. They had turned dead planets into farms that fed millions. They had built trade routes that connected distant worlds. They had established mining operations that supplied rare materials to half the galaxy. This growth, according to the Council, was happening too fast and consuming too many resources. Prime Minister Colden of the Zilani stood next, his blue skin gleaming under the chamber's lights. He spoke of human military buildup and aggressive expansion. Lady Silwen of the Ethereals followed, her voice like music as she expressed concern about humanity's unpredictable nature. Even the normally peaceful crystalline collective voiced fears about human ambition. One by one, the alien delegates listed their complaints about humanity. Humans bred too quickly. Humans adapted too easily to new environments. Humans were too good at war. Humans asked too many questions about things that should remain secret. Humans refused to accept their place as a junior species in galactic civilization. The solution, according to the Council, was simple and final. Humanity would be restricted to their current territory with no further expansion allowed. Existing human colonies would reduce their populations by half. Human military vessels would be banned from Council space. Human trade would be limited to basic necessities. Any violation of these restrictions would result in immediate military action against all human worlds. Jake requested permission to speak on behalf of humanity, but Chairman Vexstar denied the request. Humans had no vote in the Council and therefore no voice in decisions that affected them. The vote proceeded without any human input, and the result was unanimous among the 12 alien species. Humanity would be contained whether they agreed or not. The meeting ended with Jake being escorted back to his ship under heavy guard. As he traveled back to human space, he sent an encrypted message to President Carter on Earth. The message was short but carried the weight of humanity's future in just a few words. They have declared war on us whether they admit it or not. Back on Earth, President Carter read Jake's report in her private office. Her military advisors urged immediate preparation for conflict, but Carter still believed in diplomacy. She sent Ambassador Kevin Hayes to negotiate with the Council, hoping that reasonable discussion could prevent catastrophe. The alien delegates refused to meet with Hayes and sent him away without even acknowledging his presence. Humanity had been given their ultimatum, and the galaxy would soon learn what happened when peaceful people were pushed too far. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council delivered their ultimatum to humanity, and the restrictions were killing human colonies across the frontier. Captain Amy Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Liberty Dawn watching alien patrol ships block her path to the Zilani border worlds. Her cargo holds contained medical supplies that could save thousands of lives, but the Council's quarantine zone made delivering aid impossible. The plague had started on 3 Zilani colonies near human space, spreading through their population with devastating speed. Amy's medical team had developed vaccines within weeks of learning about the outbreak, using research techniques that combined human ingenuity with knowledge gained from years of cooperation with alien scientists. The cure was ready, the ships were loaded, but the Council refused to let humans cross into their territory. Amy tried every diplomatic channel available to her, but the response was always the same. The Council would handle their own medical emergency without human interference. The fact that Zilani were dying while human vaccines sat unused in storage meant nothing to the alien bureaucrats who controlled galactic politics on the mining world of New Denver. Administrator Bill Chun watched supply ships turn away from his orbital stations day after day. The Council had banned all trade between human and alien territories, cutting off the flow of essential materials that kept remote colonies alive. New Denver produced rare metals that were vital to galactic civilization, but they depended on imported food and medical supplies to survive in the harsh environment. Bill sent desperate messages to Earth requesting emergency aid, but even human supply ships were being intercepted by Council patrols. The quarantine zone surrounded all of human space like an invisible prison, enforced by a combined fleet from every alien species in the galaxy. Any human vessel that tried to cross the boundary faced immediate destruction without warning or negotiation. The agricultural planet Haven faced a different kind of crisis. Governor Kate Murphy watched millions of tons of surplus crops rot in storage, while nearby alien worlds experienced food shortages that human farmers could easily solve. Haven's advanced farming techniques could feed dozens of worlds, but the Council preferred to let their own people go hungry rather than accept help from humans. Kate organized secret meetings with local alien traders, who were willing to break Council restrictions, but the risk was enormous for everyone involved. Any alien caught trading with humans would face exile or worse from their own governments. The few brave souls who tried to maintain contact with human colonies were quickly discovered and punished by Council authorities. Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in her laboratory on Earth reviewing data about ecological disasters developing across alien space. Her years of research into xenobiology had revealed critical information about environmental problems that threatened several species, but the Council had banned all scientific cooperation with humans. Her warnings about atmospheric poisoning on ethereal worlds and soil contamination on crystalline planets were ignored by the same governments that had once valued her expertise. Elena knew that millions of aliens would die from preventable disasters, but human knowledge was now considered too dangerous to use. The Council preferred ignorance to admitting they needed help from a species they had labeled as inferior and untrustworthy. Underground resistance movements began forming on human worlds as ordinary citizens watched their government's diplomatic efforts fail repeatedly. Former Marine Colonel Steve Parker organized smuggling operations that used stealth technology and hidden hyperspace routes to supply isolated colonies. His network of volunteers grew larger each month as more humans witnessed alien indifference To their suffering, Steve's teams operated in complete secrecy, using modified civilian ships that could avoid council censors. They delivered food to starving colonies, medical supplies to sick settlements, and communications equipment that let isolated humans stay in contact with the rest of their species. The work was dangerous and illegal according to council law, but Steve and his volunteers considered it a moral obligation to help their fellow humans. The council established permanent patrol stations along the quarantine boundary, staffed by rotating crews from all 12 alien species. Admiral Morrison watched these fortifications grow stronger each month from his position commanding the human defense fleet. The aliens were building a wall around humanity that grew higher and more impenetrable with each passing day. Morrison knew that his ships were outnumbered 10-1 by the council forces, but he also knew that human crews were better trained and more motivated than their alien counterparts. The council fleet was designed for intimidation and show rather than actual combat, while human vessels were built by people who understood that war was sometimes necessary for survival. President Carter continued to seek diplomatic solutions, even as evidence mounted that the council had no interest in reasonable compromise. She sent messages to individual alien governments hoping to find allies among the 12 species, but every attempt at communication was blocked by Chairman Vextar and his supporters. The council spoke with one voice when it came to containing humanity, and that voice said no to every human request. Carter's advisors urged her to begin military preparations, but she refused to abandon hope for a peaceful resolution. She believed that rational beings could find common ground if they were willing to talk honestly about their concerns and goals. The president did not yet understand that the aliens were not acting from rational fear, but from something much more dangerous. The council had convinced themselves that humans were a threat to galactic civilization itself, and threats had to be eliminated rather than negotiated with. The quarantine zone was not meant to contain humanity forever, but to weaken them enough that final action could be taken without serious resistance. The aliens were preparing for a war they intended to win before humans even realized it had begun. 2 years into the quarantine, disaster struck the ethereal homeworld when a massive solar flare damaged their atmospheric processors beyond repair. Dr. Elena Vasquez received the news through her scientific monitoring network and immediately understood the implications. Without functioning processors, the entire ethereal population would die from atmospheric poisoning within months. Elena had spent years working with ethereal scientists before the council restrictions began. She knew their technology better than any other human, and more importantly, she knew how to fix the exotic damage that their own engineers could not repair. The solution required a combination of human materials science and ethereal energy, manipulation that only came from years of cooperative research. Elena prepared a complete repair plan and sent it to the ethereal government through diplomatic channels. The response came back within hours. The council would not accept human assistance under any circumstances. The ethereals preferred to die rather than admit they needed help from a species they had voted to contain and control. Elena watched the casualty reports climb day by day as billions of ethereals began suffering from atmospheric toxicity. Their homeworld was dying, and the technology to save it sat unused in human laboratories because of alien pride and prejudice. Captain John Mitchell commanded the exploration vessel New Frontier on a routine patrol near the quarantine boundary, when his sensors detected a distress signal from a crystalline research station. The station was drifting powerless in space with its life support systems failing and hundreds of alien researchers trapped inside. Mitchell faced a choice between following council restrictions and saving innocent lives. Mitchell ordered his ship across the quarantine line without hesitation. The New Frontier docked with the research station, and his crew worked for 18 hours straight to repair the damaged systems and evacuate injured crystalline beings. The rescue operation saved 400 alien lives, but it also attracted the attention of council patrol ships. Mitchell was arrested by a council tribunal and sentenced to life imprisonment for violating quarantine restrictions. The crystalline researchers he had saved were forbidden from testifying on his behalf. and their government officially condemned his actions as an illegal intrusion into council space. The man who had risked everything to save alien lives was branded a criminal by the same species he had rescued. Admiral Morrison received reports about Mitchell's fate and knew that the council's position had moved beyond unreasonable into pure hatred. The aliens were no longer interested in containing humanity but in demonstrating their absolute power over human actions. They wanted humans to understand that even acts of mercy would be punished if they violated council authority. The breaking point came when the Zelani military launched a preemptive strike against the human colony ship Aurora. The vessel was carrying 3,000 civilians to establish a new settlement in unclaimed space, far from any alien territory. The colonists included families with children, elderly settlers seeking a peaceful retirement, and young couples hoping to build new lives together. Commander Kelder of the Zelani fleet claimed that Aurora posed a threat to galactic security. Because it was traveling near Zelani space, his warships surrounded the defenseless colony vessel and opened fire without warning or demand for surrender. Aurora's shields failed within minutes, and the ship broke apart in a series of explosions that killed everyone aboard. The attack was broadcast across the galaxy as the Council claimed credit for stopping human expansion. Chairman Vexstar praised Commander Kelder for his decisive action against the human threat. The 3,000 dead civilians were described as acceptable casualties in the war to preserve galactic civilization. President Robert Kane had replaced President Carter after the previous administration's diplomatic efforts failed completely. Kane was a former military officer who understood that some conflicts could not be resolved through negotiation. When he received the report about Aurora's destruction, he called an emergency session of the human government. Kane's address to the nation was broadcast to every human world and colony. He spoke simply and directly about what the Council had done and what humanity's response would be. The age of diplomacy was over because the aliens had made it clear that they would never accept humans as equals. The quarantine zone that was meant to contain humanity would now protect the galaxy from what came next. Kane announced humanity's withdrawal from all treaties and agreements with the Galactic Council. Human colonies were ordered to become completely self-sufficient and to prepare for extended conflict. The human military was placed on full war footing with immediate effect. Any alien vessel that entered human space would be considered hostile and destroyed without warning. Admiral Morrison received new orders that changed everything about his mission. Instead of defending human territory from alien attack, he was now tasked with preparing humanity's first offensive operations against Council forces. The restrictions that had kept human military development focused on defense were removed, and Morrison was given unlimited resources to build the war machine that would carry humanity's response to the stars. Elena Vasquez volunteered for a suicide mission to cross the quarantine zone and provide aid to the dying ethereal population. Her request was denied not by human authorities but by the ethereals themselves, who sent a message stating that they would rather die than accept help from humans. Elena realized that the Council's hatred had poisoned even the species that humanity had tried hardest to save. The galaxy had spent 2 years learning what happened when peaceful people were pushed beyond their limits. The Council believed they had successfully contained the human threat through superior force and political pressure. They had no idea that their actions had transformed humanity from explorers and traders into something far more dangerous. Humanity had always been good at war, but they had chosen peace because it offered a better future for their children. The Council had made peace impossible and left war as the only option for human survival. The aliens were about to discover why every predator species in galactic history had learned to fear the descendants of Earth. The declaration of war sent shockwaves through both human and alien space, but what the Galactic Council failed to understand was that 3 years of isolation had transformed humanity in ways they never expected. Admiral Morrison stood in the command center of Earth's primary naval facility, watching the final preparations for humanity's response to years of abuse and contempt. The quarantine had forced humans to become completely self-sufficient, and that independence had unleashed innovations that surprised even human scientists. Cut off from alien technology and trade routes, human engineers had developed new solutions to old problems. The restrictions that were meant to weaken humanity had instead made them stronger and more unified than ever before, Morrison reviewed the technical specifications of humanity's new warships with a satisfaction that bordered on anticipation. While the aliens had spent centuries building massive vessels designed for intimidation and diplomatic shows of force, humans had created smaller ships optimized for actual combat. The Phoenix-class destroyers could outmaneuver anything in the alien fleets, while Wolverine-class cruisers packed more firepower than Council dreadnoughts. Twice their size. The key to human success lay in understanding what war actually meant. The alien species had evolved from herbivores or simple predators that rarely fought serious battles for survival. Their approach to conflict was formal and ritualistic, designed to minimize casualties and preserve existing power structures. Humans had evolved as apex predators on a world where survival meant killing or being killed, and thousands of years of human warfare had refined those instincts into deadly efficiency. Commander Sarah Blake prepared her strike force for the first major operation against Council forces. Her ships were equipped with new stealth technology that made them invisible to alien sensors until they chose to reveal themselves. The technology was based on principles that human scientists had developed while studying cosmic background radiation, turning humanity's isolation into an advantage that no alien species possessed. Blake's mission was simple in concept but devastating in execution. She would take her ships across the quarantine line and destroy every Council patrol station along a 50-light-year section of the boundary. The aliens had built those stations to demonstrate their control over human movement, and Blake intended to show them how quickly that control could be shattered. The attack began at exactly midnight Earth time across multiple star systems simultaneously. Blake's ships emerged from hyperspace using jump coordinates that alien navigators had declared impossible to calculate. The stealth technology kept them hidden until they opened fire, and by then it was too late for the Council forces to mount any effective defense. The first patrol station died in a matter of minutes, as human weapons tore through shields that were designed to stop alien energy beams rather than kinetic projectiles. The second station managed to send a distress signal before it was reduced to expanding debris. The third station tried to surrender, but Blake's orders were clear. No prisoners would be taken until the Council agreed to negotiate in good faith. Within 6 hours, the entire quarantine boundary along the human frontier had ceased to exist. Blake's strike force had eliminated 47 patrol stations and destroyed over 200 alien warships without losing a single human vessel. The message was unmistakable. The quarantine zone that had imprisoned humanity for 3 years was now just empty space filled with wreckage. Council forces throughout the galaxy received emergency orders to converge on human space and restore the containment boundary, but their response revealed fundamental weaknesses in alien military doctrine. The Council fleets were commanded by politicians rather than soldiers, and their ships were crewed by beings who had never experienced real combat against a determined enemy. General Paul Rodriguez began the liberation of human colonies that had suffered under Council restrictions. His ground forces used tactics that bewildered alien defenders who expected formal battles fought according to established rules. Rodriguez's troops moved like ghosts through terrain that aliens considered impassable, striking at targets that seemed impossible to reach, and disappearing before counterattacks could be organized. The liberation of New Denver took less than 12 hours, despite the presence of a full Zelani occupation force. Rodriguez's Marines infiltrated the colony using approach routes that alien sensors could not detect, and they struck at command centers and communication hubs with surgical precision. The Zelani troops found themselves cut off from their commanders, and facing human soldiers who seemed to appear from nowhere. The Zelani commander attempted to use human civilians as hostages, threatening to execute colonists unless Rodriguez's forces withdrew. The response came in the form of a sniper bullet. that killed the alien officer from over 2 kilometers away in conditions that made accurate shooting theoretically impossible. The remaining Zelani forces surrendered rather than face the same fate. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself working alongside military strategists to develop psychological warfare techniques tailored to each alien species. Her years of studying alien biology and behavior had given her insights into weaknesses that could be exploited without conventional weapons. The crystalline collective's shared consciousness made them vulnerable to communication disruption, while the hierarchical Mordok Empire would collapse if their leadership structure was systematically eliminated. Elena's work proved devastatingly effective when human forces began targeting alien command networks with precision that seemed supernatural. The aliens discovered that humans had spent their years of isolation studying every aspect of Council military organization, identifying critical points of failure that could bring down entire fleets with minimal effort. Captain Amy Sullivan found herself commanding a squadron of the new Phoenix-class destroyers in the first major fleet engagement of the war. The battle took place near the former location of a Council patrol base, where alien reinforcements had gathered to restore the quarantine boundary. Amy's ships faced odds of 5-1 against a combined fleet from multiple Council species. The battle lasted less than an hour and ended with the complete destruction of the alien fleet. Amy's destroyers used their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid enemy fire, while concentrating their attacks on critical ship systems. The aliens fought bravely but ineffectively, following tactical doctrines that assumed their enemies would play by the same rules they had always used. The galaxy began to understand that something fundamental had changed in the balance of power. The Council species had grown comfortable in their technological superiority and political dominance, never expecting to face an enemy that refused to acknowledge their authority. Humanity was fighting not just for territory or resources, but for the right to exist as a free species, and that motivation made them far more dangerous than any alien government had imagined. Chairman Vexstar received reports of mounting losses with growing alarm, but he still believed that Council forces would eventually overwhelm the human rebels through superior numbers and advanced technology. He had no idea that every battle was teaching humans more about alien weaknesses while revealing nothing about human capabilities that the Council could use to their advantage. The war spread across the galaxy like wildfire as human forces systematically dismantled the Galactic Council's military power. Each alien species discovered their individual weaknesses when facing an enemy that had spent millions of years learning how to hunt, kill, and survive against impossible odds. The Council's confidence crumbled as reports of defeat after defeat reached their emergency sessions. The proud Zelani fleet, builders of the largest warships in known space, watched their mighty vessels torn apart by swarms of human fighters that moved like angry insects around giants. Pilot Maria Santos led her squadron in the devastating attack on the Zelani command ship Eternal Glory, the flagship that had overseen the destruction of the colony ship Oro years earlier. Maria's fighters approached the massive Zelani vessel, using attack patterns that seemed chaotic to alien observers, but followed principles of pack hunting that humans had inherited from their ancient ancestors. Each fighter targeted specific weak points in the ship's armor while others provided covering fire and distraction. The Zelani gunners found it impossible to track targets that moved with the fluid coordination of a hunting pack. The Eternal Glory shields failed under the concentrated assault, and Maria personally delivered the killing blow with a torpedo strike that penetrated the command deck. Admiral Kelder, the officer who had ordered Aurora's destruction, died as his flagship broke apart around him. The symbol of Zelani naval power became expanding debris, and with it died the myth of alien technological superiority. The technologically advanced ethereals discovered that their sophisticated weapons were useless against human adaptability and innovation. When they deployed quantum disruptors designed to tear apart matter at the subatomic level, human engineers studied the weapon effects and reversed the polarity within days. The ethereals watched in horror as their own superweapons were turned against their creators. Colonel Danny Wright led the assault on the ethereal capital world, The same planet where billions had died from atmospheric poisoning because the Council refused human aid. Wright's ground forces moved through the crystal cities like shadows, using terrain that the ethereals considered impassable due to energy interference that disrupted their technology. The ethereal defenders relied on energy shields and directed energy weapons that required sophisticated targeting systems. Wright's troops used simple kinetic weapons and explosives that worked regardless of electronic interference. When ethereal forces tried to retreat to their underground command centers, human engineers collapsed the tunnels using mining charges and seismic resonance techniques. The battle for the ethereal capital lasted 3 days and ended with the complete surrender of their government. The same leaders who had voted to let their own people die rather than accept human assistance now begged for mercy from the species they had condemned as inferior and unworthy. Dr. Alex Chun worked alongside military strategists to develop psychological warfare techniques that exploited each species' evolutionary weaknesses. The hive-minded crystalline collective seemed invulnerable due to their shared consciousness. But Alex discovered that their unity became a liability when their communication networks were disrupted. Human forces began targeting crystalline communication nodes with electromagnetic pulse weapons that severed the psychic links between individual collective members. The results were devastating as millions of crystalline beings found themselves suddenly alone in their own minds for the first time in their species' history. The collective consciousness fragmented into countless, isolated individuals who had no experience functioning independently. The hierarchical Mordock Empire collapsed when human special forces systematically eliminated their leadership structure, using assassination techniques that seemed impossible to defend against. The Mordock relied on rigid chains of command where every decision required approval from higher-ranking officers. When those officers began dying in their heavily guarded compounds, the entire military structure paralyzed itself. Captain Ben Parker, Steve's younger brother, led the infiltration mission that eliminated the Mordock High Command in a single night. His team moved through the capital city using urban warfare techniques developed in human conflicts, reaching targets that alien security considered absolutely secure. By morning, the Mordock Empire existed only in name. Admiral Morrison coordinated the final assault on Nexus Prime, the massive space station that served as the Council's headquarters. The station was defended by the combined remnants of all 12 alien fleets, making it the largest concentration of enemy forces in the galaxy. Morrison's strategy was brutally simple: surround the station and destroy any ship that tried to escape while ground forces captured the Council chambers. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted 2 weeks and became a nightmare for the defending alien forces. Human ships appeared and disappeared using stealth technology and hyperspace tactics that made conventional fleet formations useless. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to engage in formal battle, but instead picked apart their forces piece by piece. Morrison's flagship, the Retribution, led the final assault on the station's main docking bays. The ship had been built using materials and techniques developed during humanity's forced isolation, making it faster and more maneuverable than anything in the alien fleets. Morrison personally commanded the boarding operation that captured the Council chambers. Chairman Vexstar and the surviving Council members were found huddled in their emergency bunker, surrounded by the records of their species' greatest civilizations. Vexstar had spent the final days of the war reading ancient texts that spoke of periodic cycles in galactic history. Every few thousand years, a species emerged that could not be controlled or contained by existing powers. The warnings were clear: never anger the species that survived the test, for they might be the ones the universe was testing others against. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived at Nexus Prime aboard a hospital ship to treat wounded from both sides of the conflict. She found alien survivors suffering from injuries that their own medical technology could not heal, and she worked tirelessly to save lives regardless of species. Elena represented everything the Council had rejected about humanity: compassion, scientific curiosity, and the belief that cooperation was better than domination. President Kane received the surrender documents in the same chamber where the Council had voted to quarantine humanity 5 years earlier. The irony was not lost on anyone present, as the leaders of 12 different species formally acknowledged that their thousand-year-old alliance had been defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive and unworthy. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had proven that technological superiority and political authority meant nothing when facing an enemy that refused to accept defeat. The Council's attempt to contain human expansion had instead unleashed humanity's full potential as a military force. The universe's warning had been ignored, and now the galaxy understood why that warning existed. Some species were not meant to be caged, and humanity was the most dangerous of all. 5 years after the war began, human forces stood at the gates of Nexus Prime, while the once mighty Galactic Council existed only in the history books. The galaxy had learned why the universe warned against angering humanity, but the lesson had come at a cost that would reshape civilization for generations to come. President Kane arrived at the massive space station to personally oversee the final negotiations. He could have ordered the complete destruction of Nexus Prime and everyone aboard, ending the Council forever and establishing human dominance through fear. Instead, Kane chose a path that shocked the surviving alien delegates and demonstrated why humanity deserved to lead galactic civilization. Kane's terms were simple but revolutionary. The Galactic Council would be dissolved and replaced by a new galactic alliance, where every species had an equal voice regardless of their military power or technological advancement. War crimes tribunals would judge those responsible for civilian deaths, but punishment would focus on justice rather than revenge. Reparations would rebuild what had been destroyed, but the burden would be shared according to each species' ability to contribute. Admiral Morrison accepted the formal surrender in the same crystalline chamber where humanity had been condemned. Years earlier, the 12 alien delegates who had voted unanimously to quarantine human space now signed documents that acknowledged their defeat and accepted humanity's vision for galactic government. The ceremony was broadcast across hundreds of worlds, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. Chairman Vexstar, the insectoid leader who had orchestrated humanity's isolation, was the last to sign the surrender documents. His multiple eyes showed a mixture of fear and grudging respect as he looked at Morrison and realized that humans could have chosen annihilation but preferred cooperation. The same species that had fought with terrifying efficiency was now offering partnership to their former enemies. Morrison's first act as supreme military commander of the Alliance was to announce an immediate ceasefire and the beginning of humanitarian aid operations. Human medical ships began treating wounded aliens using the same techniques that the Council had once banned as too dangerous to accept. Human supply vessels delivered food and materials to war-torn worlds, whose governments had spent years claiming they were superior to human civilization. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself appointed as the first Director of Interspecies Scientific Cooperation, a position that would have been unthinkable under the old Council system. Her first project was completing the atmospheric restoration of the ethereal homeworld, using the same technology that Ethereal Pride had rejected when billions of their people were dying from poisoning. Elena worked alongside former enemies who had once condemned her research as primitive and dangerous. The ethereal scientists who had survived the war discovered that human approaches to problem-solving were not inferior but simply different, and that combination of perspectives led to breakthrough innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. The new Galactic Alliance established its headquarters on a neutral space station built through cooperation between human engineers and alien architects. The design reflected humanity's core principle that strength came from diversity, rather than dominance. Every species contributed their unique abilities to create something greater than any single civilization could build. Commander Sarah Blake, now promoted to Admiral, found herself patrolling the same frontier regions where humanity had once been forbidden to travel. Her mixed-species crews included former enemies who had chosen cooperation over continued resistance. The quarantine zone that had once imprisoned humanity became a bustling trade route connecting civilizations that had lived in isolation for centuries. Blake's flagship, the New Dawn, carried representatives from all Alliance species on missions to explore uncharted regions and make contact with newly discovered civilizations. The ship's crew worked together using protocols that emphasized mutual respect and shared responsibility, proving that former enemies could become trusted allies when guided by common goals. Captain Amy Sullivan commanded one of the new Alliance medical ships that responded to emergencies across the galaxy. Her crew included Zelani engineers, ethereal scientists, and crystalline medical specialists who had learned to combine their unique abilities into something more effective than any single species approach to healing. Amy's ship responded to a plague outbreak on a remote world that had never been contacted by galactic civilization. The mixed species crew worked together to develop treatments that drew on the medical knowledge of every Alliance member, saving millions of lives and demonstrating the practical benefits of cooperation over competition. The war crimes tribunals began their work with careful attention to justice rather than revenge. Admiral Kelder, who had ordered the destruction of the colony ship Aurora, was sentenced to life imprisonment, but his punishment included mandatory service in humanitarian operations where he could see the consequences of his actions. The Zelani officer who had once killed human civilians now spent his days helping to rebuild the lives his decisions had destroyed. Dr. Alex Chun established the Alliance Institute for Conflict Resolution, using his expertise in psychological warfare to develop peaceful solutions to interspecies disputes. The same techniques that had been used to defeat Council forces were now applied to preventing conflicts before they could escalate into violence. Chun's work proved especially valuable when a new species made contact at the galaxy's edge. The hegemony arrived with advanced technology and an aggressive attitude that reminded Alliance members of the old Council's arrogance. Instead of responding with military force, Chun's team used diplomatic and psychological approaches that convinced the newcomers to join the Alliance as equals rather than attempt conquest. President Kane established the Alliance Charter, a document that enshrined the principles humanity had fought to defend. The strong would protect the weak, diversity would be celebrated rather than feared, and no species would be denied basic rights because of their origin or appearance. The Charter became the foundation for a new form of galactic government that emphasized cooperation over domination. The transformation was not without challenges. Some alien species struggled to abandon centuries of hierarchical thinking, while others found it difficult to work with former enemies. Human leaders like Kane and Morrison worked patiently to build trust between species that had been fighting each other for generations. Steve Parker, the former resistance leader, became the Alliance's director of emergency response, organizing aid operations for worlds affected by natural disasters or technological failures. His network of volunteers now included beings from every Alliance species. United by the belief that helping others was more important than species loyalty, Elena Vasquez stood in her laboratory watching human and alien scientists work together on projects that would benefit the entire galaxy. The atmospheric processors that saved the ethereal homeworld had been improved using crystalline computational abilities and Zelani engineering expertise. The research that had once been forbidden was now the foundation for innovations that improved life for billions of beings. As the final scene unfolded, a new species made contact at the galaxy's edge. The Confederation arrived with their own assumptions about galactic politics and their place in the cosmic order. Alliance representatives prepared to welcome them, guided by hard-learned wisdom about the dangers of prejudice and the benefits of cooperation. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest strength was never their weapons or their ships, but their refusal to abandon each other regardless of the cost. The universe's warning had been ignored, and now it never needed to be spoken again. Humanity had become the example that other species would follow for millennia to come, proving that civilization's greatest achievements came not from conquest, but from the courage to protect those who could not protect themselves.